We're at episode 6 of Drug Free Australia's Injecting Rooms Scams series. And in this episode, we are looking at whether the injecting rooms actually do reduce ambulance call-outs for opiate overdose. There are only 2 injecting rooms that have been evaluated regarding such call-outs, and they are the Sydney and Melbourne injecting rooms. Now, what has this ambulance data been used for? It was a key argument used in New South Wales Parliament in 2007 after the Sydney facility had operated for 6 years from 2001 as a trial. And back then, they wanted another 3 years approved by New South Wales Parliament, and then it was used again in 2010 to get permanent status approved for the Sydney facility. And so the text that you see on your screen here is from one of the 2010 parliamentary speeches in favour of the injecting room. And note that the claim that the injecting room had decreased ambulance call-outs by 80% was something that was also constantly repeated in the media. The claim, of course, was nonsense, but the facility has constantly peddled the same misinformation. The truth is something quite different. As we have seen in another episode, a heroin drought hit Australia 6 months before the Sydney facility opened. The 2007 government-funded evaluation, which was used to renew its trial status for another 3 years, does in this paragraph that you can see here admit to the heroin drought, which was still operative in 2007 when the evaluation was done. And so, with ambulance call-outs plummeting across the rest of New South Wales, they compared them with the King's Cross postcode where the injecting room sits, as well as neighbouring Darlinghurst. And here is what happened with ambulance call-outs for the whole of New South Wales. There was a 61% decrease in call-outs during the injecting room hours. You can see that precipitous drop. And here is what happened for King's Cross and neighbouring Darlinghurst. The King's Cross postcode is in pink with an 80% decrease during operating hours, higher than the New South Wales 61% drop due to the heroin drought. Neighbouring Darlinghurst is in blue. You can see that down here and tracking that line. And anyone looking at this graph should immediately see something which is very odd. Why doesn't Darlinghurst have a 61% decrease like everywhere else in New South Wales? Before the heroin drought, it was tracking at around half, 50%, the overdoses King's Cross had. A 61% drop would still see it tracking well below King's Cross, but you can see over here that it is actually tracking above. There is something unusual happening, as if the high overdoses from King's Cross here had somehow transferred into the neighbouring postcode. In 2010, conveniently published 6 months before debate in New South Wales Parliament to make the injecting room permanent, the 2007 evaluation was republished in a medical journal, Addiction, but this time with new data that was not in the 2007 evaluation. This time it gave the numbers of ambulance call-outs for the hours the facility was not open. That means late at night and in the very early morning. Notice that during the day, King's Cross outperforms the rest of New South Wales by about a 19% differential here. But during the night, it actually, in King's Cross, outperforms New South Wales by 29% for ambulance reductions. And so it is definitely not a closed injecting room decreasing the call-outs at night. Some other cause is operating during the day and the night. What could it be? Well, this slide gives all of the information that you need. It's clearly about change policing in the King's Cross area. Policing using sniffer dogs started 3 weeks after the injecting room opened. You can open this PowerPoint from the description of this video on this website and click on these links that you see down here. Check it out for yourself. So what's the big deal about sniffer dogs? A legal centre got the bright idea about a year later to start a website where drug users could report in real time where they were seeing the sniffer dogs. In the first weeks, as per our report across here, the website went into meltdown. Why? Because drug users wanted to avoid the dogs. And with dealers being arrested, the dealers had to move from the sniffer dog beat. Now, just where was that beat? Police were allowed to use the dogs without a warrant only inside this drug hotspot area of King's Cross you see in the map. And here is the border down here with Darlinghurst. That's Darlinghurst in this area, King's Cross up here. And that border is exactly 150 metres away from the injecting room, which you see right there. The police needed warrants to be able to cross the border from King's Cross into Darlinghurst. And so that is where the drug dealers went, into Darlinghurst. This is where the users went to buy their drugs. And because many users shoot up immediately after buying their drugs, they're hanging out for them, the overdoses and ambulance drama moved to Darlinghurst, and that's what we see. Now, we have seen this before in episode 3. It's called a displacement effect, and it's a phenomenon first identified in another Sydney hotspot in early 2001, which was Cabramatta, when sniffer dogs were introduced earlier there. Notice who one of those groundbreaking authors was, and then who seems to have forgotten, quite conveniently, about her celebrated displacement effect and findings by 2007. What about Melbourne? Here they claim a 36% reduction in ambulance call-outs during opening hours. And here is a 2019 newspaper story about police blitzes around the facility right in the middle of the 18-month evaluation period, which ended in December 2019. And here is another story, 200 dealers arrested here, and this was 6 months after the evaluation finished, so police blitzes continue. But the evaluation doesn't mention police crackdowns or blitzes as an explanation for those reduced ambulance call-outs. I'll leave you to ponder why. And here is a wonderful irony. We can easily calculate the number of ambulance call-outs that there should have been for the 113,000 heroin injections over 18 months in the Melbourne facility. We know from episode 1 that Sydney users who overdosed did so every 4,380 injections on average. How many overdoses should there have been for 113,000 injections in the room? The answer is, simple maths, just 26. The Melbourne injecting room should have, according to averages, if its clients weren't experimenting with big and dangerous cocktails of drugs, only had 26 overdoses instead of close to 2,700. They would have replaced ambulance call-outs on only 26 occasions. But the text that we read on the slide before says that they called ambulances 30 times to the injecting room for intervention. And there you can see it down here. That puts them in a net deficit of 4 call-outs. Ironic, isn't it? So here's the scorecard for all factors of the injecting room as against government-ordered objectives. And I'll leave you to ponder that in your own time. In our next episode, we're going to look at how the injecting rooms misled the public.